The lake nobody wanted. When I bought the old lake, everyone thought I'd lost my mind. To most, Havenbrook Lake was just a stagnant bowl of water surrounded by overgrown reeds and a handful of luxury homes owned by the self-righteous Havenbrook HOA. They saw it as their private backyard, a feature they lorded over others whenever they could. To me, however, it was something different, a piece of neglected public land with potential, and more importantly, an opportunity wrapped in legal gold. I'd spent months quietly researching. Buried deep in the county's records was a fascinating oversight, an outdated federal waterway designation from the 1950s, marking the lake as a navigable waterway. That meant it wasn't private property at all. It fell under federal jurisdiction governed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The surrounding HOA had no legal right to regulate it, even though they'd been pretending otherwise for years. So when I saw it listed at a tax auction for a laughable price, I bought it. Cash. The news spread fast. Within a week, the HOA president, Linda Marston, came knocking, high heels clicking like war drums against my new dock. "Mr. Hayes," she said with a tight smile that could cut glass, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Havenbrook Lake is part of our community trust." "Not anymore," I said, holding up the deed. "Bought it fair and square." Her smile twitched. "That lake is the aesthetic centerpiece of our neighborhood. We have bylaws, regulations that stop at the property line," I cut in. "And the lake's jurisdiction is federal. You can look it up." She didn't like that one bit. Over the next few days, the HOA made its presence known. They posted no trespassing signs on my property. They issued community violation letters to residents who dared to talk to me. One even tried to cut the chain on the gate I installed at the access road. I filed a police report, but the officers looked hesitant, clearly pressured by the HOA's influence. I decided to play it cool. Until the morning I heard sirens. It was a Saturday. I'd been on the water testing a small solar-powered skiff I was designing to clean surface algae. Out of nowhere, I saw flashing lights on the far side, 2 police cars and an ambulance. Linda stood there, arms crossed, talking rapidly to the officers. I rowed back to the dock. Before I could even step off, one of the officers shouted, "Sir, we received reports of a hazardous spill in this area." I blinked. "A what?" "The HOA reported potential contamination. Chemical discharge, maybe illegal dumping." I laughed. "Chemical discharge? That's ridiculous. I've been cleaning this lake." Linda's voice cut through the air. "He's tampering with a protected water feature. He's endangering our homes." The officer looked unsure. "Sir, we'll need to inspect your equipment." "Sure," I said, pulling out my folder of documents. "But before you do, you might want to check Section 9 of the Federal Navigable Waterways Code. Havenbrook Lake is federally managed, not HOA regulated, meaning your jurisdiction doesn't start until I invite it." That caught them off guard. The officer's radio crackled. A supervisor confirmed it. Linda's face went pale. I added, "Also false environmental claims to emergency services." "That's a felony," she sputtered. You can't just, this is our neighborhood." "No," I said calmly. "This is federal water. You've been trespassing on it for years." The officers left without issuing a citation. Linda stormed off, red-faced, shouting that this wasn't over. That night, I sat by the lake under the soft hum of crickets. The water reflected the moonlight like polished glass. I felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. I'd known the HOA would fight dirty, but I hadn't expected them to escalate so quickly. Still, I wasn't worried. I had something they didn't: facts, law, and a meticulous paper trail that would turn their arrogance into their downfall. Because the thing about bullies, especially HOA bullies, is they always think they own more than they do. And tomorrow, when I filed my complaint with the county assessor and the Federal Waterway Division, they'd learn the hard way that they didn't even own the water behind their backyards. The lake that nobody wanted was about to become my fortress. The HOA strikes back. By Monday morning, the lake was silent again, but Havenbrook wasn't. I woke up to find a stack of letters taped to my gate like a scarlet warning. The HOA had apparently held an emergency board meeting over the weekend. Each letter was printed on thick paper, embossed with their ridiculous gold logo, and filled with accusations that read like a soap opera script. Unauthorized activity on community property, violation of neighborhood safety protocols, potential biohazard concerns pending investigation. They even tried to fine me $5,000 for tampering with the ecosystem. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee that afternoon. I walked down to the lake to find a group of HOA members gathered near the dock, armed with clipboards, phones, and fake authority. Linda was front and center, wearing sunglasses like a battlefield commander. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "Who didn't realize we were having a lake tour?" Linda's smile was as sharp as her stilettos. "This is a community inspection. We're reviewing safety hazards and confirming property boundaries." "Oh," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Then I'll just record this for documentation." Her face twitched. "You can't record us without consent." "Actually," I said, flipping my phone toward her, "under state law, you're in public view on a federally protected waterway. So yes, I can." Behind her, a few of the HOA members exchanged uneasy looks, but Linda wasn't done. "We've contacted the Environmental Protection Agency," she said with a smirk. "They'll be very interested to know about your restoration project and whatever machinery you're operating here." I smiled. "Perfect. I already contacted them last week." Her smirk vanished. "You what?" "They approved my cleanup permit under the Federal Waterway Restoration Act. You'll probably get a letter about it soon." I let the moment hang before adding, "Maybe check your mailbox before you start another emergency meeting." That night, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. I knew because one of the residents, Tom, a quiet engineer who lived by the North Shore, sent me screenshots. "This man is ruining our lake. He's using toxic chemicals. He's turning Havenbrook into a dump site." I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. So I posted my own update, a short video titled, "Who Really Owns Havenbrook Lake?" In it, I calmly explained the legal history, showed my deed, and cited federal documents confirming the lake's jurisdiction. I didn't insult the HOA or name names. I didn't have to. The truth did the damage for me by morning. The video had over 30,000 views, thanks to a few local news groups that picked it up as a David versus Goliath HOA battle. Linda must have been fuming. At noon, I heard a knock on my door. This time it wasn't the HOA, it was a code enforcement officer and a county lawyer. "Mr. Hayes," the lawyer began, flipping open a file. "The HOA has filed an injunction claiming your property is endangering community access." "Community access to what?" I asked. "To the lake," he said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "They're claiming it's part of their maintained common area." I handed him a folder. "That's the federal title. That lake's jurisdiction is under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You can verify it yourself." He scanned the papers, brow furrowing. "These are legitimate." "Exactly. And since the HOA falsely filed a claim against federal land, that's a serious violation. I'll be forwarding this to the Department of Justice." The man looked between me and the officer, clearly realizing he'd been pulled into something messy. "Understood, Mr. Hayes. We'll review this." Linda was about to learn what happens when arrogance meets paperwork. 2 days later, the HOA meetings turned chaotic. Several residents resigned from the board. A rumor circulated that federal agents had contacted Linda for making false claims. Their emails leaked. Turns out they'd been trying to secretly rezone the lake into community parkland so they could build a private clubhouse right on top of my property. That was their endgame all along, so I went nuclear. I hired a surveyor and began erecting a fence along the legal boundary with bold signs that read, "Federal Waterway Access, Authorized Entry Only." Linda showed up again, livid. "You can't block us from our own lake." "Oh, I can," I said. "And technically I have to. Federal law requires me to restrict unauthorized civilian access for safety compliance." She was trembling now. "You think you're clever, Mr. Hayes?" "I don't think," I said softly. "I read." That night, I stood on my dock again, looking at the calm water that now shimmered beneath my solar lights. The air smelled like rain and victory. But I knew the war wasn't over. HOAs don't give up. They regroup, rebrand, and retaliate. And somewhere out there, Linda was plotting her next move, but I was ready. Because this wasn't just about a lake anymore. It was about principle, about the idea that one determined person could outsmart an entire machine built on arrogance. And the next time they tried to come for me, they'd find out what it really means to lock someone out with federal waterway codes. The federal visit. The first sign that things had gone beyond the neighborhood was the helicopter. I was drinking coffee on the dock when I heard the rhythmic chop of blades cutting through the morning air. It wasn't news media this time, it was government-marked. The sleek white helicopter descended toward the far end of Havenbrook Lake, landing in the open clearing beside the road, and out stepped two people in navy blue jackets with bright yellow letters across the back. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I couldn't help but grin. Within minutes, they were joined by a federal waterway compliance officer, a quiet man with sun-weathered skin named Agent Roth. He walked with the measured confidence of someone who had seen every kind of land dispute imaginable and already knew who was lying. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked, shaking my hand firmly. "We received your documentation. Mind showing us the boundaries?" "Of course," I said, leading him toward the waterline where my signs stood tall. "Everything's mapped and verified." Behind us, I spotted Linda and two HOA members rushing down the hill, waving papers like flags of panic. "Excuse me," she shouted. "You can't just... This is private property." Agent Roth raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you are. I'm the president of the Havenbrook Homeowners Association. This man is illegally restricting access to a community lake." Roth's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, Havenbrook Lake was classified as a federal navigable waterway in 1954. Your HOA's charter was formed in 1987. You're operating under a false claim of jurisdiction." Linda blinked. "That's impossible." "We've maintained this lake for decades." Roth flipped open his tablet, showing a digital map. "Maintenance doesn't equal ownership. You've been encroaching on federal land without authorization." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. We just wanted to preserve the neighborhood." I couldn't resist. "By calling 911 on me for cleaning it?" Linda glared daggers at me, but Roth kept talking. "You also filed a contamination report last week. We tested the water. It's cleaner than average. You owe the department nearly $15,000 in false claim penalties." The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the cicadas stop chirping. Later, as the officers examined my equipment, Roth turned to me. "You handled this better than most," he said. "Usually these HOA cases get ugly fast." "Oh, it's already ugly," I replied. "They're just losing the makeup battle," he chuckled. "You've got a good case file here. We'll be issuing a federal compliance notice. Once that's public record, the HOA won't be able to touch you or the lake again." Music to my ears. But for Linda, it was the start of a nightmare. That evening, a local news van pulled up to the entrance of Havenbrook. Reporters had caught wind of the federal visit. They interviewed me first. I didn't gloat. I just explained the facts. "This isn't about revenge," I said calmly into the microphone. "It's about boundaries, legal and personal. If people understood the difference, we'd have fewer battles like this." When the reporter turned to Linda, her composure cracked. She stammered about community heritage and outsiders disrupting harmony. The clip went viral that night. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and not one in her favor. By the next morning, the HOA's inbox was flooded. Angry residents demanded refunds for their dues. Some even called for her resignation. And then came the final blow, an official letter from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The HOA had violated multiple sections of the Fair Housing and Property Use Act by enforcing non-existent restrictions on federally managed land, penalties, audits, investigations. The show that once fined people for leaving trash cans out too long was now drowning in its own paperwork. But even with their power crumbling, Linda didn't quit. She switched tactics. I came home one night to find flyers scattered across my driveway. Stop the outsider. He's selling our lake to developers. Save Havenbrook. It would have been laughable if not for the angry faces now watching me from their porches. The smear campaign worked on some of the residents, turning fear into suspicion, so I decided to end it publicly. I invited the press to a community town hall, hosted right on the lake. I brought maps, contracts, and proof of every lie the HOA had spread. When Linda showed up to challenge me, I handed her the microphone. "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them about the clubhouse plan. Tell them about the rezoning proposal you filed 6 months before I bought this lake." The crowd went silent. Linda's face drained of color. "That's confidential board information." I projected the scanned documents on a screen behind me. Her signature glowed for everyone to see. That was the end. She stormed off the dock as the residents murmured, some angry, some ashamed. Tom, the quiet engineer, stood and said what everyone else was thinking. "I think we've all had enough of the HOA." The crowd applauded. That night, under the moonlight, I sat by the water again. The lake was calm. No sirens, no shouting, no more threats. Just peace. Agent Roth's words echoed in my mind. People build fences when they fear losing control. "You tore one down when you bought this place." For the first time in months, I felt that he was right. This wasn't just a battle for a lake. It was a victory for common sense. But deep down, I knew there was still one last ripple to come. Because power like Linda's doesn't die quietly. It drags everything down with it, and I had a feeling the next storm would come from inside the HOA itself. The HOA implodes. The calm after the federal inspection didn't last long. Silence, I'd learned, is just the sound of an HOA plotting its own destruction. By the end of the month, Havenbrook's once perfect lawns looked tired. The maintenance crews had stopped coming. No one wanted to work for an organization under investigation. Mailboxes overflowed with unpaid notices. The neighbors, who once waved politely, now whispered in driveways, forming small, anxious circles like flocks sensing a storm. And at the center of it all was Linda Marston, the queen whose crown was slipping fast. A house divided, it started with a leak of information, not water. Someone inside the HOA board had begun forwarding me emails, anonymous, untraceable. But every message painted a clearer picture. Linda had been hiding more than arrogance. Subject: urgent, insurance audit. "Linda, we can't cover unregistered property improvements. The clubhouse fund is short, $42,000. $42,000. Gone. That wasn't just mismanagement. It was embezzlement disguised as lake beautification, and she'd used my recent acquisition as a scapegoat to cover it when the local news broke the story, complete with leaked HOA bank statements. The entire neighborhood went into meltdown. Residents demanded a full audit, special meetings, resignations. At the next open hearing, the tension was so thick you could feel it vibrate through the floorboards. I sat quietly at the back, recording everything. Linda entered, flanked by 2 loyalists, her last soldiers. A tall man stood up from the crowd. "We trusted you with our dues, Linda. Where's the money?" Her lips trembled. "It was all for the community." "You don't understand the paperwork," another voice cut her off. "We understand theft." Shouts erupted. A motion for removal was filed on the spot. Within minutes, the once powerful president of the Havenbrook HOA was officially suspended pending investigation. She left the meeting without a word. Face ghost white. The hidden worth of the lake. 2 weeks later, I got a visit from someone unexpected. Tom, the quiet engineer who'd always stayed out of the HOA drama. He carried a thick binder and a nervous smile. "I thought you should see this," he said, setting it on my table. "I used to work for the county hydro department before moving here. Inside were survey reports dating back nearly 50 years. According to the maps, the lake's original design wasn't just decorative. It had been part of a hydroelectric overflow system, a forgotten branch of a regional power network. Beneath the waterline ran reinforced tunnels leading to an old maintenance facility, now buried under HOA landscaping. "Wait," I said slowly. "Are you saying this lake connects to—" "State energy infrastructure," Tom confirmed. "It's still listed as a dormant federal asset. The HOA's been landscaping over government property for decades without realizing it." My mind raced. That meant the lake wasn't just under federal jurisdiction. It was a protected energy reserve. No wonder Roth and the Corps of Engineers had moved fast once I'd filed those papers. I looked at Tom. "Why are you showing me this?" He smiled faintly. "Because you care about the lake, and because people like Linda shouldn't be allowed to bury history." The counter-strike news of the buried infrastructure leaked out, this time without my help. Overnight, Havenbrook went from a gated community to a federal interest zone. Surveyors and inspectors arrived, scanning, mapping, sealing off sections of shoreline. Homeowners panicked, property values dropped, buyers pulled out, and for once, the HOA couldn't fine anyone into silence. But Linda wasn't done. She filed a personal lawsuit against me, claiming I'd orchestrated the federal takeover to devalue her home. The irony was delicious. She was suing me for exposing her own lies. My attorney, a calm and merciless woman named Rachel Dunn, shredded the case in court. She presented the audit records, the embezzlement trail, and the verified federal maps. When she finished, even the judge looked disgusted. "Mrs. Marston," he said, voice cold, "this court finds your claim frivolous and malicious in intent. You are ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees." The gavel dropped. Linda's last weapon turned to dust. Cracks in the crown after the trial. I visited the lake again. The Corps had finished fencing off the new energy outflow section, and a small sign now stood by the dock. Havenbrook Waterway, federal site, managed in cooperation with Mr. Daniel Hayes. That last line made me grin every time. Tom joined me on the dock one evening. "You ever think about selling?" he asked. "Not a chance," I said. "I didn't buy a lake. I bought peace." He laughed softly. "Funny thing. Since the HOA froze operations, people actually talk now. Barbecues, kids on bikes, no more surveillance drones. Feels like a neighborhood again. Freedom has a strange way of returning when fear leaves," I said. Out across the water, a single heron glided low, wings brushing the reflection of the setting sun. For the first time since I'd bought this place, Havenbrook Lake felt alive. But every empire leaves ruins. A month later, I got an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a single key and a note scrawled in shaky handwriting. "You were right. The lake was never ours. But it was never yours either. You just woke it up." "Well?" I turned the key in my hand, puzzled. Maybe it was from the maintenance tunnels. Maybe something deeper was hidden under the lake. Whatever it was. I had the strange feeling the story of Havenbrook wasn't quite finished. The legacy of Havenbrook. The key sat on my desk for 3 weeks before I finally decided to use it. It was small, iron, old-fashioned, the kind of thing you'd find in a history museum. Every day, I'd catch myself turning it between my fingers, wondering if Linda's final message was a taunt or a confession. "You just woke it up." By then, the neighborhood had changed completely. The HOA was gone, dissolved under court orders. Houses that once displayed warning signs and surveillance cameras now had porch lights and laughter. The residents had formed a voluntary council, nothing legal, just people talking like neighbors again. As for me, I'd become a reluctant local celebrity. The man who beat the HOA. Reporters still called, but I'd stopped giving interviews. My war was over, or so I thought. Into the depths on an overcast afternoon, I met Tom down by the dock. He had the same quiet look he'd worn the first day he showed me the binder. "I found something else," he said, handing me a weathered blueprint. "The maintenance tunnels, you can still access them. There's an entrance at the north inlet. Looks like it was sealed decades ago with a simple lock." He pointed to the sketch. The lock symbol matched the exact shape of my key. We took the skiff out across the lake, the water dark and glassy under the thick clouds. The inlet was half hidden by reeds and moss-covered stone. After a few minutes of clearing debris, I saw the door, a rusted metal hatch embedded in concrete, stamped faintly with the seal of the U.S. Department of Energy. My pulse quickened. This shouldn't even exist anymore, Tom shrugged. Guess nobody told the lake. The keys slid in perfectly, grinding through years of corrosion. The lock clicked. When I pushed the hatch open, a gust of cold air rolled out, damp, metallic, ancient. We descended a narrow staircase into a chamber that looked like the skeleton of a forgotten era. Control panels lined the walls, covered in dust and spiderwebs. Faded warning labels read, Hydro Monitoring Station C, Havenbrook Overflow Grid. Tom whistled low. This was part of the old flood control network. They must have abandoned it when the new dam was built upriver. I wiped a panel clean and found a brass plaque bolted beneath a lever. Property of Havenbrook Energy Cooperative, dedicated to the people who protect this land. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a system, it was a legacy. The lake had once powered a small community project before bureaucracy swallowed it up. Linda's note suddenly made sense. She hadn't been mocking me. She was admitting defeat and passing responsibility. The last conversation that evening, I drove to the edge of town. I'd heard Linda had moved into a small rental on the outskirts, away from prying eyes. Her downfall had been public, brutal and deserved, but still it felt unfinished. She opened the door before I knocked. Her face was thinner, her posture smaller. "You found it," she said quietly. I held up the key. "You left it for me," she nodded. "My grandfather helped build that system. The HOA founders used his name to claim ownership of the lake, but they never cared about what it was meant for. I thought, maybe you would. Why not tell me sooner?" Her eyes drifted to the floor. "Because I thought control was the same as stewardship. You proved me wrong. There was nothing else to say." I left the key with her for a moment, then pressed it back into her hand. "It belongs to the people who built this place," I said, "not to the ones who tried to own it." For the first time she smiled, not proudly, but with something that almost looked like peace. A new beginning months passed. The Corps of Engineers restored part of the hydro system as a community-powered energy source. Tom helped design the new interface, turning the old tunnels into a small eco-research station. At the dedication ceremony, children played on the shore, while a bronze plaque was unveiled near the dock. Havenbrook Lake, Federal Waterway and Heritage Site preserved through Citizen Stewardship 2025. The crowd clapped. For once, nobody mentioned fines, rules or regulations, just gratitude. Later that night, as the sun sank behind the tree line, I stood by the water alone. The lake rippled softly, golden under the fading light. This place had started as a fight, one man against a machine, but it had become something else, a reminder that ownership means responsibility, not dominance. I touched the dock rail, feeling the faint hum of the restored turbines beneath. The lake was alive again, not because of power or law, but because people finally remembered what it meant to care. Epilogue. A month later, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of the plaque, signed in blue ink, for waking it up. LMI placed it on my desk beside the deed and the old, rusted key. 3 symbols of one simple truth. The strongest walls don't protect, they connect, and as the night breeze carried the sound of turning water through my open window, I realized something deeper. The lake had never been just a battlefield. It had been a mirror. And finally the reflection was clear.